Imagine you spent years of your life studying to become a doctor and racked up a ton of student loan debt to get your degree, but now you're a cancer researcher and are making really good money. You have a wife you've been with for nearly 10 years and 2 children. However, all that is going to get destroyed in one day. This is exactly what happened to Maurice Wolin. Wolin was a cancer research doctor living in Piedmont, California. On August 22, 2006, he began chatting online with a girl who he later found out was 13 years old. The conversation then turned adult and ultimately led to Wolin coming to the girl's house. Unbeknownst to the doctor, this was a sting operation being run by the Dateline NBC show To Catch a Predator. Unlike most encounters on the program where the host, Chris Hansen, would sit down and have a chat with the man, that didn't happen this time. After spilling a drink, Maurice Wolin got up to look for a towel. He ended up discovering the hidden camera crew and immediately tried to leave. However, the cops were outside waiting for him, and in frustration, Wolin destroyed his sunglasses.
On the ground. I wasn't going to do it.
Ironically, the glasses shattering into pieces would be a foreshadowing of what would soon happen to Maurice Wolin's life. After being placed in handcuffs, Wolin talked with police and explained why he came to meet a 13-year-old girl.
The only reason I came today, I was curious, but I wasn't going to do anything.
One thing that wasn't mentioned during To Catch a Predator was what exactly led Maurice Wolin to do this. In an interview years after the incident, Wolin said his mother had passed away from cancer. He discovered online chat rooms in the aftermath of this loss, and they offered a distraction. Back to the sting. After calling his wife and posting bail of $30,000, Maurice Wolin was released. That's where To Catch a Predator stopped, so what ended up happening to the doctor? In the immediate aftermath, Wolin lost his job as the vice president of medical and scientific affairs at a company called Quark Inc. As for the charges brought against him, Wolin pleaded not guilty and hired a high-powered attorney named Blair Burke. Burke's first order of business was to try and prevent the footage of the doctor from airing on TV. She claimed that showing the sting operation would destroy Maurice Wolin's right to a fair trial. The argument was that people would see the episode and want to be on the jury for the doctor's case to punish him and would have already made up their minds about Maurice Wolin. However, the judge denied Blair Burke's motion, saying it would violate freedom of speech, and To Catch a Predator aired the footage of Wolin. What's ironic is that while Maurice tried to stop people from finding out about his arrest, he ended up making things worse for himself. On top of having his face shown on national TV, the doctor was also indefinitely banned from all medical practice by the California State Medical Board. A preliminary hearing for Maurice Wolin was set for December 4, 2006, but it wouldn't happen until August 6, 2007, almost exactly 1 year after Maurice Wolin got caught. Around that same time, Wolin would go back to work. In June 2007, he became a consultant for a biotechnology company in Singapore. He also did consulting work for another biotech company in Seattle, Washington. During all this, Wolin was still fighting charges from his appearance on To Catch a Predator. The doctor's preliminary hearing in August 2007 was to determine if the case would go to trial. Blair Burke was still representing Maurice Wolin and asked the judge to exclude the chat Wolin had with the person he thought was a 13-year-old girl. Blair Burke said, quote, "It's inaccurate and altered and fails any test of admissibility." Apparently, there were 3 versions of Maurice Wolin's chat, and according to Burke, there were 17 major differences. Now, the group that set up the online chat with Wolin was Perverted Justice. Their explanation for why there were different copies of the chat was that the copies were printed using different programs. This led to the inclusion of, quote, happy faces in some of the chats. Perverted Justice also added that no one had the ability to edit the chats. In any case, the judge said that Wolin's lawyer made a good argument regarding the differences in the chats. However, there was no material difference between the 3 chats and allowed them to be used as evidence. The judge also ruled that there was significant evidence to believe that Maurice Wolin would commit a crime, and the case moved on to trial. Wolin and his attorney disagreed and made their argument on January 10, 2008, in front of a different judge. Burke said that the doctor was hesitant about coming to the house, and his intent was not clear. However, this judge didn't accept the argument and ordered Maurice Wolin to stand trial. Blair Burke would also try to get the First District Court of Appeal to dismiss Maurice Wolin's case, but they too rejected the appeal. The Wolin case continued to be fought throughout 2008, but in December, the cancer researcher had a victory. The judge ruled that the police violated Wolin's Miranda rights when they questioned him, since Wolin had said he needed to speak to his attorney.
What screen name do you use?
I really need to have an attorney present.
Okay.
Yet, the detective still kept the interrogation going. This meant that anything Maurice Wolin said during the interrogation could not be used against him. The prosecutors would then appeal the judge's decision, saying the doctor reinitiated his conversation with the detective and Wolin was ambiguous in asserting his Miranda rights. Unfortunately, their appeal was rejected. However, all this caused Maurice Wolin's trial date to keep getting pushed further and further back. Outside of the courtroom, Wolin's career would take a surprising turn. In January 2009, he started consulting at the Children's Hospital Oakland Research Institute. He worked with them for about 7 months, and and it is worth mentioning that at this time, Wolin was not a registered offender. Anyways, in October 2009, Blair Burke tried again to have the whole case dismissed, since it was found out that the hard drive that stored Maurice Wolin's chats with the decoy had crashed. However, the judge ruled that it did not hurt the case since the chat was stored on a proxy server. The trial was set for January 2010, but something happened before it could take place. After an over 3-year-long legal battle and racking up tons of legal expenses, Maurice Wolin pleaded no contest. The doctor was placed under house arrest for 2 months and had to serve 3 years probation and received lifelong registration as an offender. While serving his home confinement, Wolin lived apart from his wife. He later got evicted by Child Protective Services and moved about an hour away from Petaluma, California to Emeryville. On top of that, Maurice Wolin's wife would later divorce him and took their 2 daughters with her too. In an interview, Wolin said he made a terrible mistake that destroyed his family and his career. The cancer researcher also took aim at perverted justice, calling them an unrestrained vigilante organization. On top of his family leaving him, Maurice Wolin would have his medical license revoked in the aftermath of the case. This, and everything else, forced him to find more work as a medical consultant like he had been doing. With his family gone, Maurice Wolin would start setting up profiles on adult dating websites. In addition, Wolin would allegedly comment on discussions about his case or his appearance on To Catch a Predator under different aliases, trying to argue his innocence. A while after his sentencing, a probation report was made for Maurice Wolin. It said that Wolin was, quote, an upstanding medical professional and did not need to be incarcerated. It also added that the doctor had received counseling and was at medium to low risk of reoffending. At some point after the dust had settled, Wolin got back together with his wife and they remarried. However, Maurice's life came to an abrupt end. On January 2nd, 2021, Wolin and his wife got into an argument. Apparently, the doctor was drunk and expressed suicidal thoughts. 4 days later, on January 6, 2021, Maurice Wolin and his wife spoke on the phone. But later that day, the doctor would be found dead in his home by hanging himself. While this happened well over a decade after he appeared on To Catch a Predator, it does make you wonder if the fallout of the show had anything to do with Wolin's decision to take his own life. In an instant, he essentially destroyed his entire career as well as his family. He made it even worse for himself by fighting the charges for as long as he did. You have to imagine that Maurice Wolin's decision to visit an underage girl haunted him for the rest of his life.